Passion of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to Matthew. One of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said,
"What are you willing to give me if I hand him over to you?"
They paid him 30 pieces of silver, and from that time on he looked for an opportunity to hand him over. On the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples approached Jesus and said,
"Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?"
He said,
Go into the city to a certain man and tell him, the teacher says, my appointed time draws near. In your house I shall celebrate the Passover with my disciples.
The disciples then did as Jesus had ordered and prepared the Passover. When it was evening, he reclined at table with the 12, and while they were eating, he said,
Amen, I say to you, one of you will betray me.
Deeply distressed at this, they began to say to him one after another,
"Surely it is not I, Lord."
He said in reply,
He who has dipped his hand into the dish with me is the one who will betray me. The Son of Man indeed goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would be better for that man if he had never been born.
Then Judas, his betrayer, said in reply,
"Surely it is not I, Rabbi."
He answered,
You have said so.
While they were eating, Jesus took bread, said the blessing, broke it, and giving it to his disciples, said,
Take and eat. This is my body.
Then he took a cup, gave thanks, and gave it to them, saying,
Drink from it, all of you, for this is the blood of the covenant, which will be shed on behalf of many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, from now on I shall not drink this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it with you new in the kingdom of my Father.
Then after singing a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them,
This night all of you will have your faith in me shaken, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will be dispersed. But after I have been raised up, I shall go before you to Galilee.
Peter said to him in reply,
"Though all may have their faith in you shaken, mine will never be."
Jesus said to him,
Amen, I say to you, this very night before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times.
Peter said to him,
"Even though I should have to die with you, I will not deny you."
and all the disciples spoke likewise. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples,
Sit here while I go over there and pray.
He took along Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and began to feel sorrow and distress. Then he said to them,
My soul is sorrowful even unto death. Remain here and keep watch with me.
He advanced a little and fell prostrate in prayer, saying,
My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will.
When he returned to his disciples, he found them asleep. He said to Peter,
So you could not keep watch with me for 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not undergo the test. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Withdrawing a second time, he prayed again.
My Father, if it is not possible that this cup pass without my drinking it, your will be done.
Then he returned once more and found them asleep, for they could not keep their eyes open. He left them and withdrew again and prayed a 3rd time, saying the same thing again. Then he returned to his disciples and said to them,
Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Behold, the hour is at hand when the Son of Man is to be handed over to sinners. Get up, let us go. Look, my betrayer is at hand.
While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived, accompanied by a large crowd with swords and clubs, who had come from the chief priests and the elders of the people. His betrayer had arranged a sign with them, saying,
"The man I shall kiss is the one. Arrest him."
Immediately he went over to Jesus and said,
"Hail, Rabbi!"
kissed him. Jesus answered him,
"Friend, do what you have come for."
And stepping forward, they laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. And behold, one of those who accompanied Jesus put his hand to the sword, drew it, and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to him,
"Put your sword back into its sheath, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot call upon my Father, and he will not provide me at this moment with more than 12 legions of angels? But then, how would the scriptures be fulfilled, which say that it must come to pass this way?"
At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds,
"Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to seize me? Day after day I sat teaching in the temple area, yet you did not arrest me. But all this has come to pass, that the writings of the prophets may be fulfilled."
Then all the disciples left him and fled. Those who had arrested Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the high priest's courtyard, and going inside he sat down with the servants to see the outcome. The chief priests and the entire Sanhedrin kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus in order to put him to death, but they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. Finally, 2 came forward who stated,
This man said, I can destroy the temple of God and within 3 days rebuild it.
The high priest rose and addressed him.
Have you no answer? What are these men testifying against you?
But Jesus was silent. Then the high priest said to him,
I order you to tell us under oath before the living God whether you are the Christ, the Son of God.
Jesus said to him in reply,
You have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven.
Then the high priest tore his robes and said,
He has blasphemed. What further need have we of witnesses? You have now heard the blasphemy. What is your opinion?
They said in reply,
He deserves to die.
Then they spat in his face and struck him, while some slapped him, saying,
Prophecy for us, Christ. Who is it that struck you?
Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. One of the maids came over to him and said,
You too were the Jesus, the Galilean.
But he denied it in front of everyone, saying,
I do not know what you are talking about.
As he went out to the gate, another girl saw him and said to those who were there,
This man was with Jesus, the Nazarene.
Again he denied it with an oath.
I do not know the man.
A little later, the bystanders came over and said to Peter,
Surely you too are one of them. Even your speech gives you away.
At that he began to curse and to swear.
I do not know the man.
And immediately a cock crowed. Then Peter remembered the words that Jesus had spoken. Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. He went out and began to weep bitterly. When it was morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. Then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that Jesus had been condemned, deeply regretted what he had done. He returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying,
I have sinned in betraying innocent blood.
They said,
What is that to us? Look to it yourself.
Flinging the money into the temple, he departed and went off and hanged himself. The chief priests gathered up the money, but said,
It is not lawful to deposit this in the temple treasury, for it is the price of blood.
After consultation, they used it to buy the potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. That is why that field even today is called the Field of Blood. Then was fulfilled what had been said through Jeremiah the prophet. They took the 30 pieces of silver, the value of a man with a price on his head, a price set by some of the Israelites, and they paid it out for the potter's field, just as the Lord had commanded me. Now Jesus stood before the governor, who questioned him.
Are you the king of the Jews?
Jesus said.
You say so.
And when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he made no answer. Then Pilate said to him,
Do you not hear how many things they are testifying against you?
But he did not answer him one word, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now on the occasion of the feast, the governor was accustomed to release to the crowd one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time they had a notorious prisoner named Barabbas. So when they had assembled, Pilate said to them,
Which one do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, called Christ?
For he knew that it was out of envy that they had handed him over. While he was still seated on the bench, his wife sent him a message. Have nothing to do with that righteous man. I suffered much in a dream today because of him. The chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas, but to destroy Jesus. The governor said to them in reply,
Which of the two do you want me to release to you?
They answered,
Barabbas.
Pilate said to them,
Then what shall I do with Jesus called Christ?
They all said,
Let him be crucified.
but he said,
Why? What evil has he done?
They only shouted the louder.
Let him be crucified.
When Pilate saw that he was not succeeding at all, but that a riot was breaking out instead, he took water and washed his hands in the sight of the crowd, saying,
I am innocent of this man's blood. Look to it yourselves.
And the whole people said in reply,
His blood be upon us and upon our children.
Then he released Barabbas to them. But after he had Jesus scourged, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus inside the praetorium and gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped off his clothes and threw a scarlet military cloak about him. Weaving a crown out of thorns, they placed it on his head and a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying,
Hail, King of the Jews!
They spat upon him and took the reed and kept striking him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the cloak, dressed him in his own clothes, and led him off to crucify him. As they were going out, they met a Cyrenian named Simon. This man they pressed into service to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull, they gave Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall, but when he had tasted it, he refused to drink. After they had crucified him, they divided his garments by casting lots. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. And they placed over his head the written charge against him, This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. 2 revolutionaries were crucified with him, one on his right and the other on his left. Those passing by reviled him, shaking their heads and saying,
You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself, if you are the Son of God, and come down from the cross.
Likewise the chief priests with the scribes and elders mocked him and said,
He saved others, he cannot save himself, so he is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. He trusted in God. Let him deliver him now if he wants him. For he said, I am the Son of God.
The revolutionaries who were crucified with him also kept abusing him in the same way. From noon onward, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out in a loud voice,
Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani,
which means,
my God, why have you forsaken me?
some of the bystanders who heard it said,
This one is calling for Elijah."
Immediately one of them ran to get a sponge. He soaked it in wine, and putting it on a reed, gave it to him to drink. But the rest said,
"Wait, let us see if Elijah comes to save him."
But Jesus cried out again in a loud voice and gave up his spirit. And behold, the veil of the sanctuary was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked, rocks were split, tombs were opened, and the bodies of many saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming forth from their tombs after his resurrection, they entered the holy city and appeared to many. The centurion and the men with him, who were keeping watch over Jesus, feared greatly when they saw the earthquake and all that was happening. And they said,
"Truly, this was the Son of God."
There were many women there looking on from a distance, who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him. Among them were Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was himself a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be handed over. Taking the body, Joseph wrapped it in clean linen and laid it in his new tomb, which he had hewn in the rock. Then he rolled a huge stone across the entrance of the tomb and departed. But Mary Magdalene and the other Mary remained sitting there facing the tomb. The next day, the one following the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said,
"Sir, we remember that this impostor, while still alive, said, 'After 3 days I will be raised up.' Give orders then that the grave be secured until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come and steal him and say to the people, 'He has been raised from the dead.' This last imposture would be worse than the first."
Pilate said to them,
"The guard is yours. Go, secure it as best you can."
So they went and secured the tomb by fixing a seal to the stone and setting the guard. The Gospel of the Lord.
My dear people, no words of a preacher could ever do justice to the sacred words of the Holy Gospel relating the passion, suffering, and death of our blessed Lord. No words that a preacher could use could ever be more poignant than the great words written in the large letters of blood, the blood of a crucified God. These letters which say, "I love you." The words of the Passion echo until the end of time. But how true it is that during this time, this year, Palm Sunday 2020, that our Lord's words in the ever-new story of his suffering can reach us in a special way as we, not only here in Newark, New York, but we, as Catholics throughout the world, feel the weight of that heavy cross of the coronavirus, and added to this crown of thorns is also the fact that as Christians we cannot come together and celebrate the sacred ceremonies of Holy Week. Now it's true that we know we as priests are celebrating in churches Holy Mass and the various liturgies of the Easter Triduum. But this is a great suffering. And so I want to bring you three specific things, three specific details of the Passion account we just heard that I think will help you and help all of us to understand a little bit what it is that God might be wanting to do in our hearts as we face this very, very unique situation, the first time in the history of the church, when public worship almost everywhere is closed to the faithful, and when almost like the catacombs, the sacred mysteries of the Eucharist happen behind closed doors. Now there are three things, you could say three specific words, these three details, and the three letters representing them are WWF, but I'm not talking about wrestling on Palm Sunday, but that will help you afterwards, even though unlike normal you can't replay a homily that a priest gives. In this particular case you can, in case you were to forget, but these three letters, WWF, will help you remember. Again, three specific details. The first detail is the scene of the agony in the garden. You know it very well. And it's a question our Lord asks. In fact, one of the few times our blessed Lord asks his disciples for a favor, he says, "My soul is sorrowful unto death. Remain here and keep watch with me." And of course they fall asleep. Our Lord has this terrible agony where he begs that the sufferings be taken from him. And he comes back again, he finds them sleeping. And what does he say to them? He says, "So you could not keep watch with me for 1 hour. Watch and pray that you may not undergo the test. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." So our first word, the first word to keep in our hearts from this sacred gospel is the word watch. Watch. Our blessed Lord asked his disciples not only to pray, but to be there waiting, to be on their guard. That's where we get the word watchman, someone who's ready. He's looking out. He's attentive. During this time, we as Catholics, we have to watch. We have to be in a stance of prayerful vigilance. Why? Well, because we're robbed of many of the ordinary helps that we have in our life of faith, such as coming to church easily. We can certainly come. Our church is here in Newark. The church here in Newark and in Clyde is open. We can come and pray individually, but we can't attend Holy Mass as normal. We can't attend all the devotions. We can't see our Christian friends. And so we have to be in a special, you could say, posture and stance of vigilance, of spiritual vigilance. How many times do we read in the New Testament the warning, "Be vigilant and be sober, for your enemy goeth about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour." So in the words of St. Peter, be watchful and sober. So this time we know that the devil is going about, with churches closed, to the public at least, with Catholics prevented from receiving the sacraments as they normally do and should. The devil is able to use all of his tricks to discourage us and to derail us. And so that's why we have to be especially watchful. But we don't only have to be watchful because of the spiritual danger that might be lurking when we can't have access to those normal spiritual helps that we should have and that we need. We also have to watch with Jesus. You see, this time of the closure of our churches to the public is a time, you can say, not only of the suffering of the church, but also a sort of suffering for our Lord. We know he's in heaven, he reigns gloriously.
But in a mysterious and mystical way, our Lord suffers in the members of his mystical body, Christians, until the end of time. And so it's true to some extent that Jesus is on the cross until the end of the world, because his mystical body, the church, suffers. And isn't it true that our Lord, during the day of his sacred suffering, took upon himself all of the sufferings of every human heart from the beginning of time to the end? And so when we will have to watch, we're also keeping our blessed Lord company. And this is especially true when we don't have access to those helps like sacraments and Holy Mass. We have to keep our Lord company in our own private prayer. You know that there's a beautiful practice called the Holy Hour. We have a Eucharistic Holy Hour typically here in Newark. But we can still keep a holy hour even if we're not in the presence of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. The great Bishop Sheen, during World War II, recommended to all people, not only Christians, but even Jews and anybody, according to the light of their conscience, to spend an hour every day with God. To spend an hour every day in prayer. Of course, the invitation of the Holy Hour came from these very words of our Lord in his sacred passion. And so something that we can do, in addition to watching in the sense of being vigilant, we can also watch by making sure that if we are unable to come to Mass as normal, we watch with our Lord through private prayer in our homes. Many of you have access to beautiful Masses on television, but in the end we need to spend private and quiet time with God. Bishop Sheen said, if you can't spend an hour with the Eucharist, as happened sometimes to him, Bishop Sheen had the custom of spending an hour every day before the Blessed Sacrament, but sometimes he would travel, he couldn't be with the Eucharist. What would he do? He said, I will take the next best thing, God's Word. So he would open up the Bible, and he would say, God is present in his Word also, and so I'm going to keep watch with our Lord. This is our first letter, W. Here is another detail I'm almost sure you didn't notice when you heard the Holy Gospel. Pontius Pilate is seeing if our blessed Lord is guilty. He's brought before him, and there's a very small detail there which we often do not think of. Here it is. He said, while he was still seated on the bench, his wife sent him a message. Have nothing to do with that righteous man. I suffered much in a dream today because of him. This tiny passage where the wife of Pontius Pilate, whom we never hear of in the sacred scriptures apart from that one line, she receives some sort of message from God, and she takes it seriously enough to give him a warning. She gives her husband a warning. That's our second letter, warning. This time of the coronavirus, we have to be realistic. It's also God's way of sending us a warning. Remember, God is never the cause of bad things, but he most certainly can use bad things as a means to draw us closer to him. Look at how fragile we truly are in the face of this tiny, tiny little virus. Our very strong and interconnected global world could be laid low so quickly. We who trust so much medicine and science and technology so easily can be face to face with our own mortality. So easily we can be face to face with the reality that in the end, we are not lords of the universe. We are dependent on God. And so during this time, when things are so different, we have to be willing to take a warning from God. A warning to realize our true and total dependence on Him and rejoice in it. Because if God sends us a warning, what is that warning for? God doesn't threaten us just to scare us. God sends us a warning to say, come back to me. Come back to me. Isn't all of Lent a call of Almighty God for our conversion? And so this coronavirus, when things have changed so quickly, so very quickly, not just here in our own community, but in the entire world, that is also God's way of sending His children a warning. Come back to me. Realize your dependence on me. Convert. Turn to me in prayer. Beg me for a solution to your problems. So often, in recent decades, we don't turn to God when we need a solution. God is our last option. And yet, God should always be our first option. Doesn't mean you don't go to a doctor, don't ask for help, of course. But our first response in any difficulty should be to turn to God. And so, the sacred passion of our Lord comes with that warning. What happened to Pontius Pilate? Well, he didn't listen to his wife. Now, husbands, don't write me letters of complaints saying that my whole passion homily was to threaten your families if your wives are not listened to. I understand that. But the warning from Pontius Pilate's wife was very subtle, and God can sometimes send us subtle warnings. We have to listen to them. Those things are always to take Him more seriously and to turn to Him. Now, at the very end of the Gospel, yet again there's another detail which I think we probably did not notice. After our blessed Lord dies, the day after He is buried, certain of His enemies are afraid. They said, "Sir, we remember that this impostor, while he was still alive, said, 'After 3 days I will be raised up.' Give orders then that the grave be secured until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come and steal him and say to the people, 'He has been raised from the dead.'" Do you ever consider the fact that our Lord's own apostles, His own followers, did not remember what He said, that He would be raised from the dead on the 3rd day, yet His enemies remember this. Those people who did not believe He was God, did not believe He was the Messiah, remembered more than His very followers the fact that He had promised to raise Himself from the dead. What a lesson this is for us. We are our Lord's disciples and followers. I guarantee if you are watching this homily, you are a follower of our Lord. This is not put on primetime television. You had to seek it. We are our Lord's followers, and yet we can forget the very things. We who have been with Jesus for so long, we can forget His promises. Our Lord had told them that all of the bad things that were going to happen during the Passion would happen. And what did He say? He said, "Take heart, because I have planned this. And these are the very means that I am going to use to bring about the kingdom." He says, "I will be raised from the dead on the 3rd day." They forgot. The third word, the third letter is faith. WWF. Faith. We need to have faith in the promises of our blessed Lord. He has told us there will be difficulties. He has told us that our faith will be tested. We don't always know what those tests will be, but we can be guaranteed that right now, when we cannot go to Mass as normal, when so much of our society has changed to try to survive and to weather the threat of a pandemic, we are being tested in our faith. We are being tested if we believe that God is stronger than any of the threats that we face, not only the threats of our body, but even the threats of our souls. It's easy for we who are closest to our Lord to lose sight of the reality that he has told us he will be with us exactly in those moments when he seems like he has abandoned us. Our blessed Lord has not abandoned us during this time. I don't think any one of you think that, but it can be tempting to. Our Lord has told us there will be difficulties. There could be no more discouraging a moment when Jesus Christ was crucified and died. His entire mission seemed to be a total and utter failure, and yet that was the very moment that caused the triumph of his victory. Don't you think that right now, in this strange situation when our churches throughout the Catholic world are closed to the public, when it seems like the forces of world government have greater power than the spiritual powers of the church, don't you think that this moment of the passion of the church couldn't be a moment when Jesus' death is being lived again so that his resurrection can be more powerfully felt in the world, in the hearts of Christians, in the hearts of you and of me? I think it is. And I'm not saying that to be hopeful. I'm saying that because in the history of the church, when you look at these times when things get bad, what happens? Faithful Christians raise their voices to God and say, Lord, deliver us. Their faith and their hope and their love become stronger. What is happening now to faithful Christians being deprived of the sacraments which give them life? What is happening? They are forced to turn their hearts and their minds to God, to say, Lord, I desire you in the Eucharist. Lord, I miss being able to assemble in a normal way. Lord, I miss all of those beautiful things that are so important to me, which help keep me close to you. All of these things are forcing us to believe in the power of God and to seek him. All of us are forced to unite ourselves with our Blessed Mother at the foot of the cross, to unite ourselves with our Blessed Mother on next Saturday between Good Friday and the resurrection, that gray day, and say, I don't know what you're doing, Heavenly Father, but I know you know what you're doing, and I want to unite myself to it and to trust you. 3 words, 3 letters. Watch, warning, faith. Those are good letters during the coronavirus. Those are good letters for our entire spiritual life. In the end, not only the beautiful story of our Lord's sacred passion is a love story, but all of our individual lives. We just have to learn to read it. Because if we read the love story as God sees it, you'll understand that every event in our life, good and bad, is God's way of bringing us closer to him, to showing us how much he loves us, and trying to help us to love him back. Some chapters of the love story are not very pleasant. But isn't that what all love stories really are? In the end, a love story has a happy ending because the two are united. Suffering and the death of Jesus is what makes it possible for our souls to be united with God forever in heaven. Let us have watchful hearts. Let us be open to the warnings God may send us subtly or overtly. And let us have hearts of great faith